Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCG live codes, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. For today's video, I'm going to be going over my Worlds recap in Yokohama, Japan. I'm going to be talking about how I got to my deck choice, what prep I was putting in before the tournament, as well as the day itself, and talk a little bit about the Japan experience, because that was really the main reason why I was heading out there. As you guys know, I've flopped at many a Worlds here and there over the years. This one was no exception, but this one was quite different because I always had the intention of just enjoying my time out in Japan first and putting Pokemon on the back burner. So just a few pictures ready to give you an idea of what we were doing out there. Lots of touristy stuff, saw a lot of the shrines, temples, a lot of the great historic buildings and architecture. Really had a fantastic time. We were mostly based in Tokyo for the first 10 days, and from there we were bullet training out to Osaka and Kyoto, and we were able to do Skytree as well. We were able to do team labs, a lot of the art aquariums and other aquariums, so just had a fantastic time out there with a lot of my friends, some amazing food as well. I really am going to miss Kura Sushi, my favourite restaurant I think while I was out there, as well as some of the places like Yakiniku where you're able to cook your own meats, and oh boy, what an experience. It was a fantastic time. I loved the culture of Japan as well, felt very safe out there, everyone was very friendly. It's very busy, of course, there's lots of people around, but I also found it very interesting just how accepted the sort of adult nerd culture is out there, with anime and figurines and all this other stuff just on display all the time, everywhere you go. Akihabara was a fantastic place to walk through, going through all the shops, and it's just, man, just how much stuff they have out there for us little nerds who sit in the corner and don't really say much. In other countries, like in the UK, it's something that's almost kept as a secret until you're talking to people who share your interests, whereas it's just celebrated so much in Japan, and it's just a natural thing. I also thought it was really interesting to see how much crane machines and gacha is just a part of their culture. It's absolutely insane that from a young age they're being taught to be gambling addicts, and it's just an accepted thing out there. So some really amazing experiences in Japan overall. Just had an absolute blast. Definitely one of my favourite holidays I've ever had. And I was with just a ton of great people as well, so we were having a lot of fun. Yes, I was battling the heat the entire time. That certainly was a challenge. I was definitely using a hand fan the entire time, jumping from shade to shade and trying to keep out of the sun in the sort of lunchtime hours, because of course it was just blazing heat at that stage. So that was awkward, but outside of that, we just had a fantastic holiday all around, I would say. Let's direct ourselves back to Pokemon then, and I'm actually going to take you back in time a little bit towards really the start of July was when I was making my deck choice, and the reason why I had to do it so far out was because I was leaving at the end of July and wasn't planning on testing. As you just saw from the pictures, I was doing the touristy stuff while I was out there in Japan, and that was for 14 days before the tournament actually started. So all of August I wasn't going to be testing, so I had to make my decision before I even got on the plane to Japan. And essentially, I was looking at the NAIC tournament results, and that was my main basis. I think I would have been the same for a number of players. Seeing what had done well at that tournament then sort of gave me insight into what I should be looking at going into the World Championships. And although Giratina didn't do too well at the NAIC, thanks to the Arc Umbreons and the Arctinas all thriving, it really put me off the idea of playing Lost Box. And Lost Box has been something I've been playing for the majority of the season. I think Sableye and Cramorant still gives you so much control over the board, and I still feel like playing sometimes a one pricey deck is a great way to go in this format. So I looked towards Giratina V-Star very early, actually, as the Lost Box engine that gets to play one-hit KO potential, so you cover your bases against Arc builds, Lugia builds, that sort of thing, where the cheeky little one-prize guys are a little bit less effective. And this was actually started to be reflected massively in the online data. I feel like I was actually on this very, very early, and the online data actually followed my curve of thinking, which was really interesting to see. That it felt like I was ahead of the curve, but then all of July happened, and by the end of that month in July, everyone was playing Tina. It was like one of the top 3 most popular decks, and it was performing incredibly well. When I was looking at the Trainer Hill data, if you recall going back Tina was performing exceptionally, making many top 8s, going deep into these tournaments, winning some like 300-400 player online events even, and its data was showing it to be an above 50-50 against almost every deck in the format, which was insane to see, and was actually a little bit frustrating because it would have been nice to have kept this a little bit more under wraps, but I'm always very transparent with what I'm going to be playing and what I'm talking about, and I hope I did a good job of the channel conveying that I was also a big fan of Giratina the entire time, and it's always something I try and be very transparent with all of you guys. It's definitely my intentions. I'm never trying to cover anything up, and I will say it how it is whenever I can. And in this case, I feel like it may have harmed me a little bit by bigging up Tina even more so, but it is what it is, and ultimately the data was there, so it's hard to really question it. But yeah, Tina was doing really well before the World Championships in all the online tournaments. This was the list that I'd constructed, and you know me, I like to keep things simple. I like to just have a rinse and repeat of just getting into the game. So you'll see I'm playing maximum counts of VIP and Nestball as well as Hisuian, and oftentimes Giratina's in the online space, we're just playing 4 VIP, 3 Nest, and no Hisuian a lot of the time. And the one thing that I'm kind of greedy with in the deck list is I'm very short on Pokemon. I'm not playing Spiritomb as a tech card. I'm not playing Manaphy as a tech card either. And I think possibly cutting the Manaphy was a little bit too aggressive, a little bit too risky. Looking back now, but it was a space that I really wanted to have because every time I played with this archetype, I knew I was walking this tightrope of consistency. So having that extra ball search card just to get into the game, having the 9 total switch cards with a high carts count, just 1 rope and 2 switch, as well as 3 jet energy, gave me a lot of ways to just pivot in and out of my Abyss Seekings as well as my Comphase, and also having the double path, the double rocks, and the Iona give me a good amount of hand disruption. So I felt like I was trying to play as streamlined and as simple as a list as possible. But the Manaphy cut may be a little bit greedy. Also, in hindsight, I could have gone down to 1 Roxanne and maybe played Pokegear as well, just to have extra outs to Colress in the opening stages. That's something I'm definitely still considering in my head. Basically, the last, 59th, 60th card was juggling between like a switch card and a Nest Ball and even Hisuian. These were all still floating around in my head even in the last days leading up to the tournament of whether or not it should be something else. On the right hand side of the screen you can see really my last few debates of what I could be playing in place of either the Nest Ball, the Hisuian, or a switch card or just regular switch. Those are the last sort of debates I was having as I was leading up to the tournament, but ultimately the data was saying that Tina was exceptionally strong, and my early metagaming post NAIC told me that Tina was going to be a really decent choice, especially for me because I wasn't going to be playing for 2 weeks, and this archetype was well-rounded. You can face single prize decks pretty well, you can face multi-prize decks pretty well, you always have comeback potential from Path Roxanne or Path Iona against anything, so if there were going to be minor tweaks to the metagame when I was kind of switching off from Pokemon for a couple of weeks, I was hoping that even if there are meta shifts, it wouldn't really affect Tina too much because it's already like the 50-50 deck of the format, if that makes sense. So that was my reasoning behind playing Lost Zone Giratina. The other deck in my back pocket was just Arc Tina, pretty similar really, in that you're just really relying on Path Judge as like a win condition against basically everything in formats, because sometimes you just stick your opponent on an ugly hand and then you're going to get tempo, and again Arctina can fight multi-prize matchups and single prize matchups fairly well just from its natural bulk and damage output. So those are the 2 decks that were massively on my radar for the tournament. Honestly, if I'd done well day 1 with Lost Tina, I feel like I still would have jumped to Arctina just to have a mental break, because this is still one of the more difficult decks to pilot in the format, and yeah, it was also a consideration of just being tired after playing like 8 rounds or whatever. So just a small thing there, but that's how I came to the conclusion of Tina. The data was telling me it was fantastic, and I was already on the deck as the deck started to perform more and more well online, and it also meant that I could have a 2-week break and hope that the metagame hadn't shifted in a way that was negative for like a possible other deck that I could be picking up. This deck is pretty happy at facing everything. I do think this list was close as well, to be honest with you. Looking at Pram's 60, where he got top 4 at the World Championships, I'll do a whole video on the top 8 very soon, of course. But it's not too different from Pram's list. Obviously, he played a couple of interesting cards like Snorlax and Third Rod to try and accommodate that card. But overall, he basically just played less hand disruptors, didn't play any Roxanne in his deck list, and just had more sort of upfront tempo, which I suppose is pretty reasonable. But notice that he played Choice Belt, and I feel like that was a very high-value tool card. You'll see in my matchups I actually faced basically none where Belt was relevant, but I feel like covering a little bit against me or a little bit against V-Guard in Lugia decks and Arc decks seemed really, really valuable, and even having push potential into like Umbreon and stuff like that. So it's kind of didn't work out for me, but I was standing it the entire time, like the whole month I was playing this deck. Also, quick interesting tidbit, you obviously can't play PTCG Live out in Japan either. So the amount of games I actually played in Japan before the World Championships was honestly about 5, I think. And it was all against Arctina, because one of my friends was playing Arctina, and then we would play like 2 or 3 games against like Guardian, a few other things here and there, but really didn't play much Pokemon out in Japan apart from Worlds itself. Let's talk about my Worlds then, and it really wasn't all that inspiring. I didn't really get close to day 2 at all. We start losing to a Turbo Lost Box. Game 1 was the long, drawn-out game, and I have Dig towards Roxanne either in deck or from prizes, and I whiff both. So I'm not able to hand disrupt them down, and then I actually fall prey to a Echoing Horn. So it wasn't a Kyogre build, but it still did play the Echoing Horn, which is a little bit of a shame. I was also trying to dig towards Rod, but couldn't find it to recover 3 comp phase to put them back into the deck. I thought I was actually pretty close to checkmating. Obviously would have preferred to have Roxanne them, but still felt I had a pretty good chance of just winning the game, sat with essentially a board of fat Tina and then a undamaged Radiant Greninja, thinking that I was out of range of a final single prize knockout, but they were able to select Chorus into the Horn to close out game 1, and then game 2 they just got off to a flyer. It was like 10 minutes left anyway, so even if I was like clawing it back to a tie there, we'd be in a situation where one of us would have had to concede probably to avoid a tie, which was basically what I was doing at the start of every game. Even before we'd flipped over our basics, I was saying, listen, neither of us want to tie, we know the situation, let's try and conclude games. So that is something that you'll notice, that there are no natural ties in these 6 games that I played at the very least, and that was with pure intention to finish games as quickly as possible. But yeah, lost a close game 1, and then game 2 was not close, where kind of had a low roll, wasn't chorusing, and the opponent popped off, but time was against me anyway in that situation, so I was already pretty much after game 1 accepting that I was losing that series. Then we went up against Miraidon Flaffy, and this is a matchup I've actually tested against a little bit, because one of my friends is a big Miraidon player, and they've been playing it for a few months now, but this was quite a different build. It was playing a lot of cards. I honestly still don't know how it all fit into their deck list, but they were playing Magnezone, V-Star, which is obviously bad for me because I don't even play the Manaphy, so I can't even protect against that. But they were also playing Judge Path, and Judge Path, Miraidon did very well at Worlds as well, making top 32, and yeah, this one really hurt me. I basically remember low-rolling this series as well, both games. It was obviously that situation where you're just chorusing, finding not the pieces that you need, and then you Abyss Seek into the pieces, and then it gets judged or Iono'd away. So just a really sad series where I basically didn't get going. I think I got like 5-0'd both times. It really wasn't close. It was really bad. And I basically ended up win conditionless after a couple turns in both of these games. So that was a very swift 0-2. And from 0-2 position, you pretty much know that your Worlds run is done, especially with especially with Lost Zone Tina, where every matchup is run close, and you're trying to play the percentages of like sometimes a Roxanne gets them out of games, sometimes Iono pushes it too far, sometimes a path sticks, that sort of thing. It's definitely a fine margins deck. So trying to get 6 wins on the bounce, definitely not something that is all that easy. Nonetheless, we played against Chen Pao Baxcalibur in round 3. We were able to eventually get the win here. I had a very fast scoop in game 2, which was pretty well disciplined, and it gave me time to get ahead in a prize race in game 3 when we were both sort of getting developed. It was a game 3 situation. We were going down to prizes first, so I wasn't really caring too much about board state and just taking prizes as I went. But it is how it is. It is what it is. And Yoshi, who was a fantastic opponent, by the way, definitely the perfect thing I needed. 0-2 at Worlds, just kind of down on my luck, unhappy about my day, and just accepting that another year's gone by where I'm not really having an impact at the World Championships. But Yoshi, fantastic competitor, very, very funny person, and put me right back into a really good mood, and set my mind straight of just saying, hey, we're here to have fun, this is a celebration of Pokemon, and we ended up having a really fun series, and stuck to the gentleman's agreement as well on prize cards in game 3, so we didn't just go 0-3 drop at Worlds. There's no shame in that, by the way, if you did. Sometimes you just have a bad day. Sometimes you hit the bad matchups, this, that, and the other. Trust me, I've seen everything at Worlds at this point. But happy to take at least 1 win against Chen Pao. in round 4, I was up against Katron, and I was actually really excited to play his deck because I was expecting it to be a sort of Arc Pile. I found out later that they tweeted their deck list, and it was a Dream Ball Meowscarada EX, like Arc Binder drop thing, so I was actually really looking forward to play against him, but he just didn't turn up. I think he was frustrated at a 1-2 record as well, so just went out to explore Japan, which is fair enough, but it gave me a second win of the day. Then we faced a mirror match, and I was able to close this one out in a 3-game series, which was pretty cool. And in round 6, I faced another mirror match. This is where we get a loss, unfortunately. And the mirror is always close. I think I remember in game 1, they have a really difficult choice of whether or not they should... So they Roxanne me down to 2 cards, and they have the option of taking a 2-prize knockout either from Greninja or from a Tina V-Star hitting into my Tina that's in the active position. And they have the opportunity to put me on a 1-turn clock to win the game. And after Roxanning me, I have 1 boss remaining in deck because 1's in the zone. And I still had Chorus and Gate, essentially. So if they don't take out the V-Star, I have to find boss for game. And if they take out the Comphase... if they take out the Comphase with Greninja, I have to find boss for game. If they go through my V-Star with their V-Star, I don't need to find boss. I'm allowed to use Roxanne's or Chorus's to draw me towards final gate to win the game. And they actually go, first of all, Roxanning and promote Greninja, go for the gate plays, this, that, and the other. From the Roxanne, I do draw boss's orders. So I was thinking that they were taking the correct line, but we're going to lose to bad RNG. But then midway through their turn, they change their mind, go for the V-Star into V-Star knockout, which essentially gave me like 12 draws to possibly win the game from flower selectings. If I'm able to hit a Roxanne or Chorus, I can see like 5 or 6 more cards, then have Greninja draws as well. So they took the like... I think wrong line, but it paid off for them because they went V-Star into V-Star. I go flower selecting, switch flower selecting, don't hit a supporter, and I feel like I had played already 3 Chorus, so it was like 2 Roxanne and a Chorus that they were trying to dodge. So it wasn't like super low odds the play they made, but it was actually really frustrating that I still think it was an error the way they went about trying to do their end game. But I ended up winning game 1. And then in game 2, I Roxanne them into them Roxanne Uno reversing me and just like losing the game. So I go from that power position of being like a fairly easy knockout away whilst Roxanning them down. And then they're able to Roxanne, hit 2 or 3 pieces from their Roxanne, get a respond knockout on me, whilst I then end up with a 2-card hand. So a little bit salty to have lost a mirror. But, you know, it's the mirror match. It's going to be tight percentages anyway, and it is what it is. Tina was actually quite popular in the day 1 field. I think it was like the 4th or 5th most popular deck day 1. So I can't really slight anyone for playing the deck. I feel like it was a pretty reasonable choice for the World Championships, just based on the data at the very least. But yeah, a fairly unfortunate run. Didn't really get too close. Didn't face any matchups that I thought were like very good for Tina, but then there aren't many matchups that are all that good for Losso and Giratina. It is the 50-50 deck of the format. You're in the game always, but you can also find yourself losing on tight margins. And I feel like that's how my day essentially went. A really close loss against Turbo Lost Box in game 1. Basically got wiped the floor with Maridon, to be fair. And then we were just facing mirror matches, which is always going to be coin flippy at times and come down to really close situations. So yeah, that was my World Championships. Unfortunately, it's another drop for me. I've attended 6 World Championships, but commentated 1 of them. And in all 5 of my day 1 Worlds, I've still not made it through to day 2. I feel like I've had the Battle of the Green in a couple of those World Championships, but it is always a shame to see that it's another year gone by where I'm not actually competing against the very top-tier players of the world and having a chance to actually win a trophy. And that is a little bit sad for me right now. But I know that I'm really motivated for Hawaii this year, and I'm going to keep working at it for sure. Quick note on the announcements we had in the closing ceremony of the World Championships. We had Apex revealed, as well as Paradox Pokemon being a sort of new mechanic in the game. I'm actually a real fan of Paradox Pokemon. Obviously, they're all basics, which is something that I absolutely love in the game. And it feels like the way our basic EXs are being formulated right now, they seem to be in a really good place where they seem powerful, but obviously there's a big enough gap between basics and Stage 1 Pokemon and Stage 2 Pokemon that they all have their sort of variety of power levels. So I'm going to be quite happy playing aggressive like all basic decks because they'll be viable, and I imagine we're going to be getting support around the future keyword and the ancient keyword, similar to how we've seen single strike and rapid strike in our previous block. Well, actually, they're still in format, right? But it's not something that you necessarily have to go for, and I really like the fact that we're in this format, and it looks like even more so going into the next few expansions, that there will be a good enough variety where players can pick aggressive basic decks, they can pick middle of the road like stage 1 decks, and they can play big setup stage 2 decks. Having all of those options available sounds really, really important for me for a healthy game, so it means no matter your playstyle, you can find an archetype for you, and I think that's excellent. As we've seen with Single and Rapid Strike, those keywords, those specific support style cards that help you build around these decks are also going to make these cards obviously much more powerful as well. We don't really know how viable these cards are going to be because there's most likely going to be a rotation by the time we get Paradox Rift, as well as, you know, the rest of the set. So we don't know the full support around these cards. So it's difficult to speculate on how powerful these will be. From the get-go, though, Iron Valiant looks really, really good. And I also think Roaring Rune has a lot of upside as well. So I think these are the two sort of standout revealed cards. But like I said, it's too early to really speculate on those things. But very cool to see that they're adding in these Paradox keywords. And I'm hoping it's going to be a mixture of, similar to Rapid Single and Fusion Strike Mons, where we have key support cards, but also maybe even a throwback to the SP era if we're going to be able to build all basic style decks that have a variety of attacking threats, possibly some type coverages, and just some flexible damage output, similar to how we've seen the Lost Zone engine be this like flexible many one-of attackers that you can like recycle with Rod or Clara and whatnot. I feel like that could end up being the case for these Paradox Pokemon, so I am really excited for this mechanic coming into the TCG. As for A-Specs, though, I'm a little bit less optimistic. They only showed us the border of an A-Spec. They didn't even specify that it was going to be item cards or tool cards. That was the case for the previous A-Specs, so there is design space, possibly. They've not revealed that anything is going to be in a certain category. They could get even more creative with A-Specs and add in supporter cards, add in Pokemon, possibly, as well. But the concept of A-Specs is very similar to Radiant Pokemon in that you can only have one A-Spec card in your deck in its entirety, so these cards will compete against each other. In the past, obviously, and even in the expanded formats, Comp Search and Dowsing Machine have been the sort of standout item cards where they either add just extra consistency to the deck or some recycle. We already have Forest Seal Stone in format, so I'd be surprised if Comp Search is one of the first A-Specs to sort of be reintroduced to the game, but it could still end up being a thing. Why not? Just having extra tutor in the game isn't necessarily that bad. My headache with A-Specs, especially if they are only item or tool cards, is that there's a couple of key issues with A-Specs as a mechanic. The fact is, if they're very powerful cards that are just tuned way too high, sometimes the person who just finds their A-Spec first, naturally as they draw through their deck, is going to have a better time against you because they just hit their power spike first, for example. Also, there's the issue of prizing cards, right? If you prize your A-Spec and it's an integral part of your strategy, we saw this with Virizion Genesect back in the day where the deck was powerful without the tool, but the G-Booster was the big one-hit KO card in the deck, and you could only really play Town Map and hope for the best, really. If you find that your crucial cards are in the prizes and we don't have enough interaction with the prize cards, it could end up having a real feels bad moment. So I actually feel A-Specs is one of the worst mechanics in the TCG, unfortunately. I'm much happier with Radiant Pokemon because you can at least Hisuian Heavy Ball for them, so everyone has access to these cards. So I do really hope that that's something that is managed with A-Specs. If they are item cards, give us lots of item tutor-style supporters, like Arvans, like Iridas, that sort of thing. Make those sorts of supporters be worthwhile in the game. I also think it's funny that if Comp Search does come back, we could Arvan for Forest Seal Stone and Comp Search. That's a very, very versatile search that we could have. And if we are going to be seeing really impactful tool cards or, again, items that sort of define archetypes like G-Booster did back in the day, you have to give us more ways of grabbing these sorts of cards out of the prizes, because it's just not fair that your deck is built around this one card, and even in like mirror match situations, the opponent has it and you don't. That's a really horrible feeling. Or just in games in general, where if a deck is so fine-tuned towards this one card being so important to the overall sculpture of the deck, it can also lead to just really bad feelings. So yeah, that's just something that I bear in mind for A-Specs. Overall, it's not like the most toxic mechanic. It's also not boring. It can create a lot of interesting design space, but I do think, or I do hope, that it comes with this sort of warning of please allow the sets that the A-specs come in, give us a way of using these, tutoring these, so we all have good access to these cards and access to the prizes, because otherwise it's going to lead to some bad feeling moments, I think. The final thing to touch on is Hawaii for the World Championships. It's going to be yet another year where I attempt the invite, of course. I've never been to Hawaii. I didn't go to the old World Championships. I wasn't a Worlds competitor back in those years. It's 2016 and onwards of the World Championships that I've attended, so really looking forward to going to Hawaii. I think it's going to be a shorter trip than I did for Japan, but possibly a little bit of island hopping and enjoying the sun and the beach, and again, should be really awesome to get integrated with the culture. It is awkward what's going on in Hawaii right now, but really happy to see that Pokemon are putting money towards the wildfires and such. So yeah, I'm hoping that it's going to be a fun experience for all and a real nice throwback to players who went to Hawaii all those years ago and can re-experience those sorts of memories, which is going to be amazing. I am also going to be trying to commentate as many tournaments as possible next season, so it's likely that I'm going to be playing the regionals where I'm not commentating, and then also trying to go to many more international championships. I won't be going to OCIC because I just literally have no holiday remaining left in the year because I spent so much in Japan. But in 2024, I'm planning to at least go to NAIC as a player, and also trying to get... Sorry, I'm not going to go to LATAM, but I could go to OCIC and NAIC, and then I'll be at EUIC. I have no idea if I'll be commentating or not. It's just is what it is, but I'll be there in some capacity, and if I'm not commentating, trying to get championship points there as well. I probably should do a video on the sort of bar for the World Championships 2024, because it is a big difference from the previous seasons, but that's for another time. I've rambled on long enough, so I'm going to head off now. Hope you guys enjoyed my little recap of the World Championships. Japan was a fantastic place to visit. Worlds itself, you know, the venue was incredible. Seeing so many people, being surrounded by friends was fantastic. Got to cube out there as well, which is great. So I had a real blast. For anyone who said hello and chatted to me at the World Championships, thanks so much. It really does motivate me to continue to make this content. So I'll see you in another video tomorrow. Cheers.